Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vaga Muradian here at the Dubai Air Show, where our coverage is sponsored by Leonardo DRS, and we're here at the Aerospace Industries Association stand to talk to Eric Fanning, who leads this great organization celebrating its 100th anniversary with new branding and a very, very busy agenda as always. Eric, talk to us a little bit about what the priorities are for the association here. I mean, obviously, you guys are the beating heart of the U.S. delegation, given you host all the military flight crews and DoD delegations. United Arab Emirates, absolutely key ally, but a little bit of frustration on Capitol Hill with some bans in effect in the wake of the Yemen operation with its partners, Saudi Arabia and others. Talk to us a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish and what the American delegation here is trying to accomplish.
Well, I think the main role we play at any air show is that of a convener. We're sort of the convener of choice for industry and government. And when we're at an air show in another country, also then that foreign government, that foreign country, those military elements and industry elements as well, because we think dialogue is important. It's the sort of main thing that AIA engages in is dialogue back at home or at an air show. And we have a lot of issues to talk about, but those partnerships are important, which is why we want that dialogue, because they're years in the making. They pay dividends for years, and those types of interactions around the world are important for our country and for our industry. People want, foreign countries want, American products, foreign industries want to partner with us, and these air shows are a great setting for us to have those conversations.
You guys are obviously very, very big advocates for free trade and also strong alliances around the world, which are important to industry. How is the issue coming up of that congressional restrictions on this important ally? Obviously, we had the big Chinook deal was notified, and that was seen as progress. UAE officials recognize and have been talking to us constantly about the importance of the alliance with the United States. Is this coming up, and is there a resolution in terms of some of the conversations you guys have been having?
Well, obviously, industry follows the policy set by government, by the United States government. What we try to foster is make sure that the dialogue doesn't stop, because these are important partnerships. And at times, there are disagreements. Friends can disagree, things that we need to work through, and the lead on that is our government. It's not industry. But we think it's important to maintain that dialogue because the partnerships are important. And as I said earlier, the partnerships are years, decades in the making with countries around the world. And so we want to make sure that engagement is maintained and that we're discussing these issues. And so we always welcome parties to sit down at the table and try and work out the issues, very legitimate issues that need to be discussed, but not stop the dialogue.
And obviously, to underscore the importance of the United Arab Emirates as an ally, you have the F-22, F-35, and a lot of other equipment. Obviously, a lot of UAE interest, obviously, in acquiring the F-35 capability at some future point. Let's talk about back home and the budget picture. A little bit more clarity on continuing resolutions. There are those even within the administration and up on Capitol Hill, and also interestingly in the GOP, who are perfectly happy with a full-year CR. Everybody has repeatedly made that message, just like when you were in the Obama administration, the administration made clear CRs were not a good way to live. I recall our first interview in 2014 was discussing that very issue. Talk to us about where we are, the advice you guys are giving, and how you're engaging on the Hill to try to get members, to try to get to some semblance of regular order.
Well, CRs, I think, are misunderstood. People don't understand the disruption of the CR. When you're inside of government, you see it upfront and personal. And we've been living with CRs at the start of a fiscal year far too often. Unfortunately, governments learned to deal with this because it's happened so many years in a row. A one-year-long CR is very disruptive for government planning, and then for industry as well, to figure out how to do its planning, how to think about its investment strategy. It's particularly disruptive now, I think, though. It's one thing when you have years of consistent budgets, basically flatline investment. It's another when you're talking about a couple of years where the budget's been increased, which is important for investment. A CR doesn't allow you to implement those changes. Most people don't understand what a CR is. A CR is basically saying take the budget that you were operating on last year and continue it for whatever it is, 30 days, 90 days, a whole year. But it doesn't allow you to make any of the changes that come in the new budget because those aren't authorized. And so what we say on the Hill unfortunately, year after year after year after year, is you need to give us a budget in a timely way and let us have something that's predictable and dependable so we can plan around it. And having a CR is just budgeting historically, budgeting in the rearview mirror.
Absolutely absurd way of doing business. And actually, if you calculate how things are delayed and the waste on it, it's just astonishing. And the fact that we've managed to do this now for 10 years is just stupefying.
Very disruptive, and it's very expensive, as you said. Taxpayers are not getting a dollar for a dollar investment because it's not an effective way to spend money. It's not an effective way to plan, and we're not getting the bang for the buck that we should. And trying to implement some of the really hard choices that the Department of Defense has been making the last couple of years.
And speaking of the Defense Department, Aerospace Industries Association and some of your sister organizations, NDI, National Defense Industrial Association, or NDIA, and others, have been the interfaces between industry and the DoD leadership. Ellen Lord is very, very fond of always pointing out that there's a robust industry dialogue, and it's happening through the trade associations. But everybody has feedback about the acquisition reforms that are taking place, the department's efforts in order to change. You were part of an administration that was trying to reform the acquisition system. Every administration I've ever covered has been focused on changing the. I started covering this industry on the 5000 series rewrite in 1992. What's some of the feedback and how the feedback AIA is giving to the customer as they try to do this better at the end of the day? But there are still challenges and still a remarkable amount of frustration on the part of a lot of folks, because there's large, delegation, on the arms export side of things. Ms. Seabolt is here, who's the Air Force International Chief, having replaced Heidi Grant, who went over into another job in the Pentagon. Talk to us a little bit about some of the feedback on acquisition, on arms exports, and what your membership is interested in seeing from the department as the United States, tries to engage more around the world.
Well, those are two very different and broad categories. Let me take acquisition first. Ellen Lord has been incredible in terms of engagement and collaboration with industry. And it's interesting for me because I went from a long stint in government to industry as Ellen was going the opposite direction. And we talk often about the gulf of misunderstanding, the gulf of lack of knowledge between industry and its customer. And that type of engagement is very important to make sure that we get it right. There's a lot of taxpayer money expense at risk. There's a great deal of complicated technology that we're talking about, and the more that we can work together on these things, the more we increase the likelihood that we get to success and get capability into the hands of warfighters as quickly as possible and as functional as possible. And so we appreciate that engagement that we're getting from the Department of Defense right now. You're right. There is nothing that's been written about more than acquisition reform since the dawn of time, more than any other type of reform combined, I think. Everyone's trying to get it right. Everyone's trying to learn from it. It's enormously complicated because these systems are enormously complicated. There's not another market for a lot of these things. And so that partnership is very important. And a lot of people these days talk about maybe that partnership is too close. I don't think that's the case at all. We need to be working closely together in order to try and get this right. And so it starts with that engagement, that dialogue, and that's the role that AIA plays to try and convene the different sides, bring them together so they can understand what's going on and work through these things collaboratively. On foreign military sales, on technology transfer, we got to follow the government's got to figure out the policy. That changes from time to time based on the geopolitical landscape around the world. But I would just say this, those sales are important. They're important for the U.S. economy, and they're important for our nation's security because they lead to long-standing partnerships. Everybody wants American technology. It's better. American partners are more reliable. The sustainability of this equipment is better when it comes from the United States than from other places around the world. So, and those types of relationships pay dividends for years to come. And so we don't want to stop the dialogue even when there are disagreements or issues that our governments have to work through. And so we've been advocating to try and figure out how we can make the process a little more transparent, actually. Not to change no's to yeses, but to get to the no or the yes more quickly and in a way that we can explain to foreign governments. And that's what we've been focused on, is the process.
Two quick questions. One is EXIM. Some positive news on that. You guys obviously are very, very strong on national security credentials, but on the other hand, you are also a free trade organization and encourage that around the world. We've talked about the trade wars a little bit. Bring us up to speed on the impact of the trade wars, some of which have ameliorated, but some of which remain in place, and also the EXIM and how Congress and especially the Senate has to respond.
Well, we do support free trade, but also fair trade. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. Oftentimes, you got to work through the details, and we encourage all parties, our government and all the other governments that we're going through this with, to try and get to the table and work through these issues. We understand the issues that this administration is trying to address in terms of fair trade, but we want to make sure it doesn't negatively impact free trade. We are the largest net exporting sector in the manufacturing space, $90 billion net exports last year, and that's at risk if we can't get the parties together and figure out how to mitigate the trade wars that are taking place right now. On Export-Import Bank, that's another thing I think is misunderstood by a lot of people. First of all, it returns money to the Treasury, which most people don't understand. Second of all, there are 110 other countries that are using something like the Export-Import Bank. And if you don't want one in this country, we've got to make sure none of the other countries have it too, because it's unfairly tying the hand of our industry behind its back when they're competing against other companies whose countries are supporting them with some type of vehicle like the Export-Import Bank. So we strongly advocate for the reauthorization, the full reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank.
Yeah, I mean, for example, China has been extremely, really good and trying to replace the Exim Bank in the international system by underwriting some of its transactions and underwriting customers who want to buy from China. Last question. I know this is probably a little bit early, but in every campaign, presidential campaign that I've ever covered, AIA has become involved in terms of briefing candidates and their teams on how to think about important issues. How are you guys thinking about that, and have you started doing briefings, or is that going to be something that's going to be a little later in the cycle?
Well, we have started thinking about it. Obviously, we're kind of in the midst of the beginning of what will be a long campaign cycle. I think every election is different now these days. 4 years is a long time in the cycle, and so we're not really sure how this is going to play out. We're prepared to meet with the campaigns. Our issues are not really the ones that the campaigns are talking about this early in the process. But we are eager to sit down and talk with them and explain to them why aerospace and defense is important to the United States, not just in terms of national security, but the tremendous economic impact that it has, both in scale but also in quality, the quality of the jobs that it provides. And so we're watching like everybody else. We're thinking through how to engage, and we stand ready when those campaigns want to talk about these issues.
Do you think that the industry itself has to do a better job, and industry in general, to talk about the benefits of what's brought to the table by large industrial manufacturing concerns that are working in the high-tech sector? Because there is a little bit of a vilification of industry to a degree in some of the rhetoric from the campaigns. I mean, are there things that the trade associations and the industry should be doing better to try to make their case more publicly at a time when there is so much discussion about that?
Absolutely. We can always be improving on that. Even in your question, for example, large scale, our industry is made up of very large companies and then an enormous supply chain that goes down to very small family-owned companies. And we need to continually communicate the scale and scope of our industries, space, civil aviation, and defense, how technologically advanced many of these companies are, what they're doing for the country economically, and then the vast scale of the size of the companies that are involved in this industry. The supply chain is tens of thousands of companies that support the big primes that you witness out at this air show today.
Eric Fanning, who heads the Aerospace Industries Association on this, its centenary. Eric, always a pleasure, and I hope you have a very successful Dubai Air Show.
Great. Thank you very much, Vago. Good to see you.